Hi, Facebook. Day 2 of my 30-day Facebook challenge. It's Saturday, so I got up early, went on a walk with a friend, and I don't usually dress like this on Saturdays. I'm actually going to a wedding this afternoon, and we're leaving right after I finish this Facebook Live. I told my husband, I'm committed to this 30 days. I have to do it today before we go to the wedding. So here I am. I actually created a little image to kind of accentuate or better communicate maybe some of the things I want to explain today. I figured this weekend we would really nail down the basics of functional medicine and the philosophy so that you can also start to look at health challenges kind of from the holistic perspective that we as functional practitioners look at health challenges with. So I want to explain, and just know, when you hear the word like root cause, I'm sure you've heard that so many different places now. There's lots of natural and holistic lifestyle blogs out there. So I'm sure you've heard the phrase root cause really thrown around. And I think a lot of the times, practitioners aren't totally specific around what they mean when they are referring to that phrase. So I wanted to explain that to you a little bit more in depth today. And maybe, like, if you're watching this video, thank you so much for those of you that shared with me the things that you want to learn about. I was able to change my editorial calendar a little bit to make sure that I can implement your concerns and to help you kind of learn how we see it as functional practitioners. If you are watching this video and maybe you're a little bit confused about how this applies to what you're dealing with, write it in the comment section. Myself or my assistant are going to be answering the questions this whole month, and we're so excited to be engaging with you guys in this platform to help empower you. So, but follow along and see if you can't fill in the blanks for yourself right now. And I just think this is such a super empowering perspective. Hey, Danae, I know I'm going to a wedding. I don't dress like this, not even for Facebook Live. Okay, but I'm literally walking out the door and going to a wedding after this. Thank you for tuning in. We do appreciate it. Okay, let me show you my little image here so you can see. You guys don't need to see my phone. Okay, so check this out. You can see this image right here, okay? And this is explaining kind of like, remember when yesterday I mentioned we work from the inside out? Now the idea here with working from the inside out is to look at all these internal factors. What are the factors at play in terms of each individual that's coming into the office? Okay, so I have lots of different people that come in with thyroid disorders, for example, or fertility struggles, or high cholesterol, obesity, whatever it is. And while they're all coming in with the same quote unquote diagnosis, or quote-unquote signs and symptoms, right? What has caused that mechanism to dysfunction can vary from person to person, okay? For example, let's take cholesterol, high cholesterol, something a lot of people deal with here throughout the world, but especially here in the US, right? When somebody comes in with high cholesterol, typically that's been the sign, right? That's the sign. It's not even like, it's a diagnosis for sure. There's an ICD-10 code for that. So it could be considered like the disease. But what we look at, or at least what I look at as a functional practitioner, is what kind of these three factors, we start with inside the root, what kind of genetic predisposure do these individuals have to high cholesterol? That would matter. Some people have genetic predispositions where they don't necessarily have like the proper capacity to make those lipoproteins clear out throughout the body, metabolize them as readily or as rapidly as maybe would be considered optimal for ideal cholesterol or for ideal health. If there's a genetic predisposition there, we need to acknowledge it. That's going to affect the way that we recommend dietary lifestyles, for example. So like if that person had been on maybe they're getting rid of carbs, like they decided to go no carb whatsoever, their body is kind of relying a little bit more on maybe like animal protein, which is naturally a little bit higher in fat. That might not be the perfect diet for that individual based on their genetic predisposition, right? Now, I'm the first person to admit that genes are not your destiny. Of course, there are these other factors that play into genetic expression. That's what I've listed here. So there's the genes themselves. There's the epigenome. The epigenome are the external factors that hang out above the gene that determine what gets activated along that DNA strand. And then there's the non-genetic exposures. So that would be things like I've listed them off here: diet, lifestyle, quality of air, toxicity, water quality. Are you getting enough minerals in your water? Is there toxins in your water, social environment, emotional belief systems play a part in this, so on and so forth. So these are considered things that we would also want to look at when we're looking at the root cause. So the root itself, like literally the inside, the very first thing we want to assess are what type of genetic factors are at play. Whereas conventional medicine is going to look at that high cholesterol, maybe make some general dietary recommendations, but right now the conventional approach just isn't looking into the genetic predisposition, nor are those dietary factors being, nor are those dietary trends being implemented into conventional primary care right now. So that's just one example. Okay, let's take another really common example. I mentioned thyroid, right? It's got a lot of thyroid cases. Somebody walks in and they've been diagnosed with hypothyroid, right? Well, hypothyroid would fall into the disease, right? The signs and symptoms would be like insomnia, hair falling out, thinning eyebrows, exhausted but can't fall asleep, low energy, lethargic, whatever, right? Those would be considered signs or symptoms. And then the disease would be considered the hypothyroid diagnoses, right? Well, a lot of natural doctors might go into the next layer here, which is pathologies, and see like, okay, well, what kinds of things could be contributing to that person's manifestation of thyroid disorder. So things like gut health could be a factor. Things that are considered in that pathology realm would be, my cat wants to go outside, sorry. Chronic inflammatory struggles, that could be considered a pathology. Pathologies are referring to the mechanism of dysfunction that is affecting the physiology itself. With hypothyroid symptoms, I'm also looking at is there an autoimmune manifestation at play? That would fall under pathologies. Is the detox off? Do they have poor methylation? That would actually fall into the genetic, looking into the genes, looking into the MTHR deficiency or mutation, looking for those kinds of things. And also looking even deeper into the non-genetic exposures, looking at the diet, the lifestyle, so on and so forth. And we usually will tailor the non-genetic exposures in terms of what we can tailor, depending on how committed the patient is to change based on the genetic predisposition. So it does make sense to start here in the genetic, looking here and more in the root cause, and more of a functional medicine practitioner will address not just the genetic predisposition and not just the non-genetic exposures, but also looking and investigating what pathologies are at play here, what mechanisms of dysfunction are showing up that we can go in and positively affect. That's what happens, you would be looking into that if you were doing a heavy metal test, a stool test, a hormonal test, even blood analysis was looking into the quote-unquote pathology that's in play, right? So what I love about functional medicine compared to conventional is we have so much more to assess. There's so much more to look into. We can have a much more complete picture of what's going on with people in terms of their health. And when we can see all these factors at play, we have much more to work with. Now, in terms of how I work in my office, our solutions, our natural solutions are things like herbs, supplements, essential oils, food, of course. Food lays the foundation for change, always talking about diet and lifestyle. There's so many different positive ways that you can affect your diet, and I actually don't believe in any single dietary philosophy. I think it depends on the person and their own unique image in terms of what's happening and what's at play in their health. I know that for me, for a very long time, I was very highly served by paleo. For me, for my particular condition and what I was dealing with, the paleo diet served me really very, very, very well. I know that now I actually do really well on more of a plant-based diet. I don't rely as much on animal protein anymore. Had that been the case back during the time when I was going through I had a lot of adrenal dysfunction, HPA dysfunction, thyroid symptoms, major digestive imbalance for me, I didn't do well when I focused on eating more of like a vegan, plant-based diet. In fact, I tried it and I felt worse. And so I believe that people have different health conditions, different factors at play that will determine what type of dietary philosophy is going to work for them and their unique needs in that time frame. And to know what are your unique needs, that's where having a solid idea around what's happening in your unique case in terms of these factors here. Now, just to review before I wrap up, in terms of core, what's at the core or the quote unquote root cause when we're looking at functional medicine? We're looking at what's happening with the genetic predisposition, what's happening with the epigenetic factors, what non-genetic exposures are at play here that need to be looked at: diet, water, lifestyle, belief systems, emotional health, so on and so forth. Only once we've looked at that does it make sense then to start looking at the pathologies. Now, for me personally, I start looking at those two from the get-go because they can tell a lot. We can tell a lot. We can have like a bigger picture in terms of what's happening with each person. So pathologies, looking into, is there digestive imbalance? Is there like parasites, fungal overgrowth, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, hormonal imbalance? We look at blood work, looking at pathologies. And then the disease and the symptoms, these outer rings, that's what conventional medicine is really focused on for the most part, unless if you're working with more of an integrative practitioner. And so I want to empower you guys, like the next 30 days has a lot to do with how you can be more educated and more empowered around understanding what this stuff looks like for each particular health condition. And how can you investigate that? And then how can you take the reins on getting your hands on natural solutions that really nourish your body to do what it was meant to do, which is come back to a state of homeostasis and balance, because that's when you feel good. That's when you feel energized. That's when you can sleep well at night. That's when you can handle emotional and physical stressors with more resilience in your day. So stick with me these next 30 days. It's going to be fantastic. I decided that I'm going to be grouping out my weeks. So we're going to start. We have a lot of questions about things like anxiety. I had somebody message me about depression. So we're actually going to start out with gut health, because gut health is often the center of those emotional stressors. And I've actually also found gut health to often be one of the underlying pathologies for most hormonal imbalance challenges as well, which is another hot topic that I saw a ton on through my comments and then also in the personal messages as well. So keep them coming. I want to hear from you guys. Let me know. I'm plan on tailoring all of my content this month based on what the audience wants to hear about. But just know we're starting out with gut health next week, and I'm going to be parlaying a lot of that as well into the signs and symptoms of emotional distress, so anxiety and depression, as well as hormonal imbalance. And then we'll get even deeper into those topics over into the second week and the third week as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Lots of love to you guys. Have a wonderful rest of the Saturday, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye.